Fully open the display module 360 degrees. Lift the keyboard from the top edge and carefully pull it up. Flip the keyboard over. Disconnect the ribbon cable from the system board. Lift up and remove the keyboard. Place the keyboard on the top cover. Reconnect the ribbon cable to the system board. Flip the keyboard over. Place the keyboard into the cutout and snap it into place. Disconnect the battery cable from the system board. Remove the 4 screws that secure the battery. Lift up and remove the battery. Replace the battery into position using the locating posts for alignment. Replace the 4 screws to secure the battery to the chassis. Reconnect the battery cable to the system board. Pull the release tabs until the memory pops up. Lift it out of the slot with care. Insert the memory into its slot using the notch for direction. Press it down until it snaps into place. Remove the single screw to allow the SSD card to pop up. Lift the card out of the slot and remove it. Insert the SSD card into its slot. Replace the single screw. Place the wireless LAN card into its slot. Secure the bracket to the card and snap it to the chassis. Connect the 2 antenna cables to the card. Connect the ribbon cable to the card and to the system board. Peel off the battery from the I/O board. Disconnect the cable and remove it. Reconnect the cable to the I/O board. Reattach the battery. Disconnect the cable from the I/O board. Lift up and remove the thermal sensor. Place the thermal sensor back in position. Reconnect the cable to the I/O board. Place the board in position using the guides for alignment. Replace the 2 retaining screws. Connect the cable to the board. Disconnect the ribbon cable from the I/O board. Remove the 4 screws that secure the I/O board. Lift up and remove the I/O board. Place the I/O board back in position using the I/O cutout for alignment. Replace the 4 screws to secure the I/O board to the chassis. Reconnect the ribbon cable to the I/O board. Disconnect the I/O board cable. Disconnect the battery cable. Disconnect the speaker cable from the system board. Remove the 3 screws securing the system board. Lift the system board up and remove it with care. Disconnect the cable from the rotation lock board. Remove the 2 screws securing the rotation lock board. Lift up and remove the board. Remove the 2 screws that secure the volume button bracket. Remove the bracket. Lift up and disconnect the cable. Remove the board. Reconnect the cable and place the volume button board in position. Replace the bracket back in position. Replace the 2 screws to secure the bracket. Remove the 2 plastic caps and the 2 screws underneath. Lift the bezel up and pry it in a zigzag pattern to release the latches. Remove the 4 screws that secure the hinge. Carefully remove the hinge out of position. Remove the rubber cable guide from the hinge. Repeat the process for the other hinge. Restore the rubber cable guide into the hinge. Carefully place the hinge back to its position. Replace the 4 screws to secure the hinge. Repeat the process for the other hinge. Place the LCD bezel back in position. Snap the bezel in position around the edges. Replace the 2 screws and the plastic caps. Reconnect the LVDS cable. Place the LCD panel back into position. Pull it until it is properly engaged with the display cover. Replace the 2 screws to secure it. Reconnect the Windows button board cable. Remove the 2 screws securing the camera bracket. Disconnect the signal cable and remove the module. Using a flathead probe, peel off the camera from its bracket. Reattach the camera to its bracket. Reconnect the signal cable to place it back into position. Replace the 2 screws to the bracket. Remove the ribbon cable from the wireless LAN card. Disconnect the antenna cables from the wireless LAN card. Release the bracket that secures the wireless LAN card. Lift the card out of the slot and remove it. Place the system board back in position. Replace the 3 screws to secure the system board to the chassis. Reconnect the speaker cable to the system board. Reconnect the battery cable to the system board. Reconnect the I/O board cable to the system board. Disconnect the Windows button board cable. Remove the 2 screws that secure the LCD panel. Push the LCD panel until it is unsnapped. Turn the panel over. Disconnect the LVDS cable. Remove the other modules from it. Remove the 10 Torx screws from the bottom side. Turn the system over and fully open the display module 360 degrees. Disconnect the volume button cable. Disconnect the touchpad cable. Remove the 5 screws in the marked areas. Press the top cover to release the latches and then lift up to remove the top cover. Place the top cover in position and press down until it is properly engaged. Replace the 5 screws using the proper screw size as marked. Reconnect the touchpad cable. Reconnect the volume button cable. Close the display module and turn the system over. Replace the 10 Torx screws in the marked areas. Disconnect the power connector cable from the system board. Release the cable from the cable guides. Lift up and remove the power connector. Place the power connector back into position. Route the cable through the cable guides. Reconnect the cable to the system board. Disconnect the fan cable from the system board. Loosen the 6 captive screws that secure the heatsink and remove the 6 screws that secure the system fan. Lift up and remove the heatsink. Place the heatsink in position using the screw holes for alignment. Fasten the 6 captive screws to secure the heatsink and replace the 6 screws to secure the system fan. Reconnect the fan cable to the system board. Disconnect the cable from the I/O board. Lift up and remove the lid sensor. Place the lid sensor back in position. Reconnect the cable to the I/O board. Remove the single screw that secures the board to the chassis. Lift up and disconnect the cable. Remove the power button board. Reconnect the cable to the power button board. Place the power button board in position. Replace the single screw which secures the board to the chassis. Using a flathead probe, peel off the ambient light sensor from the top LCD panel. Disconnect the signal cable and remove the module. Reconnect the signal cable to the camera. Place the ambient light sensor back into position and press until it is properly taped. Disconnect the LVDS cable from the system board. Disconnect the camera cable from the system board. Rotate the display assembly to the 270th degree angle. Place the system flat at the edge of the table. Remove the 4 screws that secure the display assembly to the base part. Lift up and remove the display assembly. Place the display assembly back to position using the screw holes for alignment. Replace the 4 screws to secure the display assembly to the base part. Reconnect the camera cable to the system board. Reconnect the LVDS cable to the system board.